Hi everyone, welcome back to our ongoing series on how to create a life operating system in Notion. After the previous video, there were a lot of comments about what about this approach or what about that approach, and there were a number of different ways you could do things, and I had made certain trade-offs. Each of them has pros and cons, and I had made the trade-offs and made a commitment to certain decisions on how to implement them, but the counterpoints were legitimate, and they do have some advantages, even though they have some trade-offs. And so I wanted to slide in this extra video to show you some of the alternative options that are highly relevant to the system we're building and different ways to do things that have some benefits, even though they have some costs that go with them. So I'll let you make the choice. And at the same time, I want to keep an open mind. So I'm actually committing to trying these, even though I had rejected them for alternatives. I'm going to actually try them for at least a few weeks, maybe a couple months, and then make a decision for myself only after having tried both methods for a while. Then I'll have a much better, more informed basis on which to make my final decision as to which I use in my ongoing system. But regardless, I'm going to give you the option to make the choice too by presenting now the alternatives. And the alternatives tend to be a little bit more advanced, but if you followed everything in the last video, you'll easily follow this step up on the new applications of various formulas and rollups that take things to a little bit more automated level. And then finally, the third of the three examples I'm going to give today contradicts to a degree what I said in the previous one, that you cannot do rollups of rollups. It's true that you cannot do a rollup of a rollup, but there is a way of working around of mirroring the rollup and then rolling up the mirror of the rollup. So there's a way to do it in some circumstances. It doesn't work for everything, but it works particularly well when you're rolling up numbers. So I'll give an example of how to do that, and that becomes very relevant when we're talking about the daily, weekly, monthly roll-ups of your performance statistics. It lets you roll up your daily information up to your monthly through the weekly. So I'll give you that example. As usual, share any thoughts or questions in the comments below. If you want to expand the discussion, join me on Twitter, ask a broader range of questions, or chime in on any topics far beyond the scope of this particular video. We can do that over at Twitter. And with that, let's dive in. So we're jumping into the alignment zone. I'm going to do all the examples in this area. I'm going to close the sidebar just to give you a cleaner view. Scrolling down, I'm going to open the project just quickly before we dive in. I've changed the views and I find this much better for reviewing the action items in the alignment zone. I've changed the default view to the calendar view. That is, to me, just a much easier way to work with actions when it's a large pile or a long list, rather than the way I had previously had it, which was just a long list view here. I like the list view a lot when it's just one day, whether it's the today toggle or the tomorrow toggle in the action zone. But when you get to a whole week, it just feels messy and it's just sort of a clutter and it's hard to visually distinguish. So when we get beyond a single day, I love the calendar view. So I've actually made this default view in the alignment zone a calendar view, and it's just way easier to work with. So that's the default there. I've also changed the default for projects and made this a double view. I have a top level view that's much more concise with a gallery of just the active projects. And that's sorted by task progress bar, which we'll get into in just a moment. And I've made this the smallest setting. If you go into properties, you can do different sizes. I made it small so I can fit the most in. And it's just a quick access view of the active projects only. This is the same view we have in the action zone. So when you're just jumping in to manage the tasks or their alignment with the goals in a specific project, I can quickly access the active ones right there. Then in the same toggle view, notice this is still in the same toggle, it opens a second view underneath the gallery view that has a board view based on status. So I call it the status board view. I've got a number of views, but this is now my default. Whatever you put on the top here is the default. That's what'll naturally open up when you're opening a clean session in Notion. So it's particularly important which one you put on top because that'll be the default open. So I've got the future, the next up, on hold, active. So if I'm dealing with an active project, I'll just engage with it up here and it's got all the relevant stats here. But if I'm managing which ones are active and which ones are next up and what I'm putting on hold, if I'm managing the lineup, then I use this board view. And it's a really effective way with the old view. Is great in other ways and does provide the maximum amount of information in the smallest amount of screen real estate. So that's useful in a way. And if I'm managing the design of the board, then I'll use this. So that's what I'm going to use as we do our demonstration here. But when I'm just implementing my own personal operating system, managing my life, I like using that board view a lot. But when designing, changing, and building the system, I think nothing beats the table view, so that's what we'll work in here. The first of the advanced rollup features and alternate approaches I wanted to show you is the automated progress bar. So we're going to bring automation to the progress bar. Previously, it was called just the progress bar. I've changed the name to task progress bar, and I'll explain why. But first, let me show you what the change is. Now, this is a formula, and it's going to automatically adjust. There's been a lot of discussion on this approach versus my previous approach. My previous approach was to just do a subjective assessment. And after I show you how this works, I'll explain the pros and cons of this approach versus the previous approach. So this here is a remaining actions rollup. This is a completed actions rollup, and this is a total actions rollup. Actions are tasks. So these are action items from our action items database down here. And the first one is rolling up the remaining actions. We're in the projects database. The relation is the connection to the action items or task database. We're selecting property, the done checkbox, and then we're choosing calculate, which is total, add up all the unchecked boxes that are linked to this particular project. So that gives us 7. There's 7 unchecked done boxes, which means there are 7 tasks assigned to this project that have not been completed. Then we do the same thing with another roll up for the check boxes. So this time it's done box is checked and it's totaling them. So there are 5 that are done and 7 that are undone, unchecked. And then we do a total. We roll up all of them. So relations to the action items, properties action item, and count all, which is just total or sum. So that's the checked and the unchecked combined. So first of all, the remaining actions total is useful in and of itself. It tells you how many to go or how close you are to completing everything and either needing to add more tasks to complete that project or checking the project off as done. Now, these two are what are used to create the progress bar. So these are what the formula is pulling from. So the formula is pulling from completed actions and total actions. I'm going to put a link in the show notes below to how to access this formula so you can just copy and paste it. All you have to do is change the name here for completed actions and for total actions to match whatever you have titled these columns. These 2 columns here. So if you have different names than these, you'll change the names in the formula to just be the same as the 2 names you have for the equivalent properties in your database. So now at this point, in this new application, you don't touch any of these. This is completely automated. You don't touch the total action, you don't touch completed actions, and you don't touch remaining actions. It rolls up. All you do is go into the project, and as we've discussed before, manage the actions down here. You make sure that any active project, this project is in active status. So it needs at least 1 active task, if not 2 or 3. And then you line up the rest. All you're doing is managing these and then finishing them and checking them off as done as you go. When you check it off as done, it'll disappear from this list. The filter is set for done is not checked. So that means once you check it, it disappears from here. So this is managing the active tasks to go. And it says we have 7 remaining tasks. So we'll have 7 tasks down here. That's the count. Now going back to the overview. So that's going to automatically calculate this. You don't touch any of these. That's purely automated. Now, here are the pros and cons. So obviously it's nice to have it automated. That's great. The downsides are, first of all, tasks are not all equal. So that means this is assigning equal weight to every task, even though some tasks are big and some are very trivial. So it's not an accurate representation of the percent of the project toward completion. It's a measurement of the percent of your tasks that are finished of the total task count. So that's why I preferred the manual approach of giving a subjective entry, is because you could give a more accurate assessment of how close you are to finishing the project overall, rather than just ratio count of tasks done versus tasks total. And then the other downside of this versus the manual way is that you often add tasks as you go. So the total number of tasks in the project at any given point is very rarely the total number that will be in there at the end. So typically as you go through it, you add more toward the end and the task count climbs. So the percentage is misleading as a representation of progress. However, it is valuable as an indicator for managing the tasks. So it'll tell you as you get toward 90%, 95, 100%, that you need to see whether there are more tasks to be added. It's a prompt now for you to come in and manage the tasks, perhaps earlier than you would have otherwise. So it doesn't necessarily mean the project is completed. Now this one is completed. Once it's at 100%, you get a checkbox here. So I've hired the video editor. I'm testing and training the video editor. So that's progress over some of our previous visits to this project. And now it says that I've completed 100% of them, but I'm not actually done. So that's an indication I need to come in and add any remaining tasks. So first we train video editor. And that's going to be set to active because that's what I'm doing right now. We give that a due date. So we'll work on that now. I'm actually already working on it. Give that a due date for today. And that is active. So we'll make that a high priority because I very much want that to be happening as quickly as possible. I come back to the project here and now I have this additional one. Now there's another one I need after that, which is review training projects. So that's going to be next up and no due date for next up. So then we go back to the project. Now we've got 2 more to go. So now we come back here and we look at the progress bar for Hire Video Editor, and now we have 50% to go. Now, part of the problem here is I didn't actually enter everything along the way on the journey to hire the editor, or I would have had a larger completed count and then a larger total count. And this should really be more like at 90%. So if you're managing it properly along the way, but I've just switched to this automated system now after a lot of feedback from some very astute viewers. So I appreciate all the discussion we've had on this possibility. So I'm giving this a try for a while. My initial sense was it's better to have a more accurate measure of how close you are to actually finishing the project rather than a management of the tasks that have been entered thus far. But I can see value in this being a trigger to jump in and add any additional tasks as it's getting higher. In some ways, it's helping you facilitate and execute the project more rather than just giving you a gauge on the time to finish. So I see value either way. You now have the choice, so I've given you the demonstration on how to use it. I'm going to be using it for a while, and then we can all make a choice after we've tried it. So that's that. So the other thing I wanted to introduce, which is also a good one to show you here in the projects database, another approach I want to give you an alternative option for is this active column. Remember, we added this active checkbox so that we could roll up to the higher level a count on how many projects. So in the goal outcomes, we now get this roll up that's counting how many unchecked, unfinished projects are remaining in pursuing that goal. In the same way, we're doing remaining actions here. So we're rolling up the actions that are not done, unchecked, into the projects database. So it gives us a nice count of how many to go. Now, in this example I'm going to show you is we're going to automate this project count. So already we're rolling up the project count, but the only way to roll it up is by a checkbox. So previously I had a manual checkbox here where you just check it when you're done. In the same way we have a manual checkbox here, which looks like that in the task database. But a lot of people found it more effective, and I can see certainly some clear benefits to having this as a formula. So I've changed that to a formula. That's the formula indicator. And now it says, so now it has an if-then statement. If the status, which is this column here, is active, quote, then the result is true. True means checked. Otherwise, it's false. False means unchecked. A lot of people who have shared comments do it a different way. They have, when it's completed, it's automatically checked. But I like to have the checkbox as active in this case. And that way we have more of a visual indicator at the top of those that are active. Although really I'm going to hide this column. I only have it active here. I only have it visible here for the sake of this demonstration, because once this is activated as a formula, you don't need this anymore. Previously you needed it in order to do the manual check, but right now active will indicate. But a lot of people are using completed as the trigger for the check. So the formula would say if, quote, completed, then check. And then when it's checked, it would either disappear from the filter, but then you have all these various types other than active that would be counted. So I've made it such that active is the trigger for a check. So all the active ones are checked, and therefore, when we go up here, project count, we're rolling up the formula for active, and it's counting all. It's totaling the number of active projects tied to each goal outcome. And this way, all we do is set the setting here. If we change it to hold, that just dropped down to here and it's unchecked. If we change it to active, it jumps back up and it's checked. This is automated now. Now the trade-offs here are not significant. It's really not a big deal. It's easy enough to check off a checkbox. But this way you can completely manage it with one field, which means you can hide the other field and you have fewer fields that are visible, so less clutter, which is a positive. The negative, which is fairly slight, but something, which is this takes 2 clicks to choose, 1 to open and 1 to select, whereas a checkbox takes 1. When you can just click it, boom, it's faster. So in the case of projects, it's not a big deal, but in the case of tasks, which I'm checking off 9, 10, 12 a day, I actually just want to go fast, boom, 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 especially when I'm on my mobile device, where it's even faster just to hit check rather than having to double tap and open Dropbox selections. So what I've done is I've left it as a manual checkbox here in the task database, but in the project database, where I'm checking these off much less frequently and really running everything by the status selector, I've made it an automated formula, and that rolls up nicely. So I find that's an optimal trade-off. At least I'm going to try that for a few weeks and see how it goes. But regardless, wanted to present it to you and give you the option. So I'm going to also, in the show notes below, give you a link to where to get this formula. It's pretty simple. You could copy it there. I just want to make sure that is exactly the same wording as the title for the column that has your status trigger. But look for the link below if you want to copy and paste this formula, and it'll have a little bit more description on how to apply it at the link. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about this workaround in order to do a roll-up of roll-ups. The previous video, when I introduced roll-ups, I said you can't do a roll-up at a higher level. Once you've done a roll-up, from one database, say the task database, up to the projects database, you can't take that roll-up result and roll it up again to the goals database. Now, it's true you cannot do that. That is not a functionality you can do in Notion, unfortunately. I've added it to a list of things that I'm encouraging them to put into the software, but at the moment, that can't be done. But there is a workaround in some circumstances, particularly when you're rolling up numbers, which is a lot of the most important stuff to roll up. So let's go up here. We're gonna take a look at our review cycles. We're gonna first go into the weekly review. So I've opened the week of May 11th through 17th, just as an example. And what we have down here is from our daily, down here is the relation, the direct relation, that's the arrow, to the daily tracking. So for the week of May 11th through 17th, we have the individual days from the daily tracking for the 11th through the 17th. All the days are linked through a relation. That's the relational link to the daily tracking database. And because of that, we can automatically roll up all these magnifying glass icons over here, indicate an automatic roll up. That once you make that link, all that data comes with it automatically. That's a beautiful thing when we sit down to do our weekly review. But that information rolls up and we cannot roll it up then again to the monthly review. We had to summarize, and then the summary could be rolled up, which in some cases is better. Like here we're rolling up the improvements and we've got this list of improvements. And what I like about having to actually do a summary and not rolling that up directly is if you were to roll that up directly to months, you'd get 30 days worth of entries, and that's just too many. So if during the weekly review, you review those and look at what's most significant, what's reoccurring, what's most troubling in terms of needed improvements from the week, and then you pick one or two and enter it here as a summary. And then that would roll up to the month. So that's what I'm doing, and that works really well. I think that actually works better than rolling up the roll-up. But if you wanted to do a roll-up of data, sometimes the numbers would be helpful because you can average numbers, and that can consolidate and simplify just by averaging. And that could be helpful to roll up directly from these daily entries. So for example, we have sleep average. The average, this is each night's sleep, the length of sleep I got each night. And then this is an average of that. And that's great. That both the individual listing is useful because you can see outliers, and the average is great, especially when you're looking at a table and looking at trends over time from week to week. But this is a roll up, so you cannot roll that up to the monthly review. And that would be interesting to look at. But what you can do, and I've already done it here, but I'm going to show you how to do it again, is I've applied a formula that mirrors the roll up number. So we're taking the roll-up number and entering it into this formula, and it is duplicating it. And then it's also giving us the ability to round up the decimals to 0.5 rather than 0.486, which is a bit messy and a level of precision that's just not useful. So I'm going to show you how to do both of those. So first and foremost, let's add a new one here. So we're going to add a property. I'm going to drag that up right under this one. And the property, we're going to choose formula. So we've already, this top one here with the magnifying glass is the roll-up. This is connected to the daily tracking database. It's choosing the sleep time calculation property. That's the total amount of hours slept during all those days. And then we're doing an average. We could do sum, we could do median, min, max, whatever. But average is what's most useful here. So that's what we choose. So that's already rolling up. Now, but that can't be rolled up further to the month. So we want to mirror it with this formula. So what we do here is we take this new property we added, make it a formula. We'll call it sleep av form in order to make it clear for the sake of this demonstration. Now we're going to take this formula, and again, I'll link to this below so you can access the formula to copy and paste it. The formula in the middle is what mirrors it. I'll show you how this all works in a moment here. So you paste that in there, and now it mirrors that number, but it gives you way too many decimal points, and that's just not helpful. But it is mirroring it, and at this point, we can now roll this up to the months because it's not a roll-up, it's a formula. You can roll up a formula, but not a roll-up. But we really want a cleaner number. And that's actually going to help the view here having that cleaner number. So the way you do that is you put this round part in the front, and then you put this times 10 parentheses slash 10 divided by 10. Now, it's kind of absurd that you have to do this, but this is how you round a number in Notion. If, just to show you how this works, if this were 100, the number of decimal places here, then we would get 2 decimal places. You see, we got it there, right there. If we put 3 here, watch the number here, put 3 here, then you get 3. If you put just 1, 0, you get 0.5. It's completely insane that that is what you have to do to round a number in Notion. There should be a simple selector. You can do all these other things with numbers, but you can't round it to right decimal place. But you put this formula in, and it will take any crazy long number, and it will round it nicely. So we just wrap that round around it. So when that whole number, that whole formula is applied, so in here we go round, and then here we go times 10, close, divided by 10, we get the nice rounded number, which is what I had already done here. And now it's a duplicate, I'm just going to delete it, but I wanted to show you how to do it. So now from this week, we have created a formula that mirrors the roll up. So when we go into the month, so now we've jumped over to April, just as an example. And now when we come down here and add a property, so here we got the property we just added, change it to a roll up, because now we're rolling up. And now you select weeks, because we're rolling up, we're in the month database now, but we're rolling up through a relational link to weeks. In the weeks, we choose any of the 3 formulas. Now, these are all formulas that are mirroring rollups. You notice none of the rollups are listed. There's no magnifying glass icon, which is the indicator for rollup, but we do have all 3 of the sum indicators, which means these are formulas. Each of these 3 are formulas that are mirroring a rollup. The one we just looked at and calculated is the sleep average. So let's choose that. And now by default, it's taking each of the individual numbers. Why is that? Because so these are the weeks that this month of April is linked to through a relational link. And because of that, we're getting 5 weeks, 5 numbers rolling up from that formula. And so that's one sleep average for each week. Now we can change this to an average itself, and then we get the average for the whole month by averaging each of the 5 weeks that are connected through relations to this month. Now we've got the average sleep for the whole month. And that's pretty useful. So it's nice to be able to do that. So that works perfectly for numbers. The problem is when we go to text. See, it'd be nice also to be able to roll things up from action items database to the projects database to the goal outcomes. But let's look at goal outcomes, for example. In here, one of the additions I showed you in the last video is the pillars are now a roll up. So we'll add the goal, we'll connect the goal outcomes to the value goals through a relational connection. And then since the value goals are already connected to the pillars up above, these are rolling up along with them automatically. So that's working out great. Well, it'd be nice if we could mirror this and then have these pillars roll down to projects, for example. The problem is when you do that, you make this a formula and you select that column, it is visible here. Pillars is listed and it does mirror it. But since this is a link, it's coming through as a link. It's giving you the URL, which is totally useless and doesn't help you at all. So you can't just mirror the name. Now, remember when we did the roll up of the number, we had to add a formula that's called the 2-number formula. So it's a 2-number in parentheses, and it converted it into a numerical format. So it wasn't just a text. If you didn't do the 2-number, if you just did the prop link, it would show you the number, but it would be in text format, so you couldn't apply math to it. So we did the 2-number formula to turn it into number format, which worked perfectly for numbers. Now, this is not a number, so there's no point in using the 2-number formula, and of course it wouldn't work anyway. It's almost like we need a 2-text formula, but there isn't a 2-text formula to translate this into text, stripping it from the URL. So if anyone has a solution to that, enter it in the comments below. If whoever enters the most concise and clean explanation, I'll pin that to the top. If there is a solution and someone in our community here, one of our viewers articulates that in a comment, I'll pin that below. So be sure, if you want to be able to mirror these and roll these text lines up and down, especially through the pillar to pipeline pyramid here, which would be a nice use of it, then take a look and see if there's a pinned explanation on how to do that. But I don't think there is. I've looked pretty hard for this and I can't find a solution. So I think this is just not functional for this usage. As far as I can see, it's only functional for numbers. So again, if someone has a solution for that, leave it in the comments, I'll pin it. Otherwise, this is a current limitation of Notion. But it's really nice that we can roll up the numbers. So let's be appreciative of that. The trade-off of doing this, of course, is just that you're adding more fields. So when you're mirroring fields, you're adding fields. And that's why I resisted it previously. And in many cases, when you have a list of them rolling up from daily, rolling those then up through the weeks up to the months, 30 is too many, and rolling those up to the years, it'd just be way too many entries. And it's not helpful to be flooded with so many different micro level entries rolling up to aggregation level. So I actually find in many instances, for example, where I showed you with the improvements roll up, it's better to look at the 7 days during the weekly review and give a summary of what you see and consolidate it down to the biggest point for the week, and then have that roll up to the month, because then you get a more concise, more clear, more actionable indication of what matters. So that's pretty much it. Just wanted to slide this quick addendum to the previous relations and rollups video so that we could be a little bit more comprehensive in various options and upgrades to the system, and you guys can see the trade-offs and make choices for your own system. I've also implemented some of these so I can test them, and together we can see which approach we prefer. So following this video, we're finally going to get into the vaults. I apologize for the delay, but wanted to keep these two together side by side in the sequence of video releases. But we're definitely diving into the vaults next. I have a lot of really exciting stuff to introduce here, stuff that you haven't seen before. That section of the system has been expanding while I've been doing the demonstrations on other parts, so it's changed a lot since the original overview video, and even a lot since the Keep Productive video I did several weeks ago. So I've got a lot to show you on how knowledge management can be enhanced and achieved through this series of vaults that capture information, cultivate, distill information, and facilitate the formation of a knowledge database that can be drawn upon either for your own insight and information or for creating knowledge products like blog articles or newsletter articles or any kind of written, recorded, scripted form of expression. It's the ultimate way to cultivate, shape, and distill and then present all this information. So it's really an incredibly valuable resource, and that's why I'm excited to dive into it through the next series of videos. So I'm training an editor right now. That's going to enable me to put videos out on a more consistent basis. So apologies for the irregularity over the last few weeks. I'm very eager to get back to a more consistent release schedule and get these out to you guys so we can all explore all these ideas together. So any thoughts or comments, leave them below. Join me on Twitter if you want to expand the conversation. If the Vault series is of interest, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get updates on future videos. Leave thoughts or questions below, or join us on Twitter for the expanded conversation. And hit like if you found this valuable. I also read a newsletter called Mind and Machine on increasing human capability. I give away several of my best Notion templates to anyone who subscribes to the newsletter. You can, of course, unsubscribe at any time, but I hope you'll give it a chance. I work super hard to pack it with a lot of valuable insight. The newsletter link is also below in the show notes. Thanks for watching. Lots more to come.